Act like nothing matters. What if the thing you've been fighting your entire life, the anxiety, the pressure, the constant need to get it right, to be enough, to matter, what if all of it was optional? Not because life isn't serious. Not because your pain isn't real. But because the weight you've been carrying was never actually yours to carry. Today I want to talk about one of the most misunderstood ideas in human psychology, philosophy, and spiritual wisdom across thousands of years of recorded thought. Acting like nothing matters. Not nihilism. Not apathy. Not giving up. Something far more powerful than any of those things. I'm going to walk you through what this phrase actually means, why the people who truly embody it are the most alive, most creative, most fearless human beings on the planet, and how you can begin living this way starting today. Stay with me. This one will change something in you. Open Book Part 1: The World That Taught You Everything Matters. Before we talk about acting like nothing matters, we have to understand what we're pushing back against. From the moment you were born, the world began teaching you a very specific lesson. Everything matters. Your grades mattered. Your behavior mattered. What people thought of you mattered. How you looked mattered. Whether you fit in mattered. Whether you succeeded mattered. Whether you were liked, chosen, praised, approved of, all of it mattered enormously. And so you learned to perform. You learned to scan every room for social signals. You learned to calibrate your words before you spoke them. You learned to shrink yourself in certain spaces and inflate yourself in others. You learned that your worth was conditional, tied to output, appearance, achievement, and approval. And the cost of all that learning? Chronic anxiety. A mind that never fully rests because it is always monitoring, always measuring, always asking, am I doing enough? Am I enough? What do they think? Did I say the wrong thing? Am I falling behind? This is not a personality flaw. This is not weakness. This is the entirely predictable result of a world that trained you to believe that your survival depended on getting everything right. But here is the question no one ever stopped to ask you. Does it actually? Does the opinion of that person at work actually determine your worth as a human being? Does missing that deadline actually define your intelligence or your future? Does that embarrassing moment 3 years ago that you still replay at 2 in the morning actually matter as much as your nervous system insists it does? The answer, when you look at it honestly, when you strip away the emotional charge, is almost always no. Almost nothing that felt catastrophic in the moment actually was. Almost nothing that felt permanent actually lasted. Almost nothing that felt like it defined you actually did. And yet we keep living as though everything is a verdict on our worth. As though every moment is a test we could fail irreversibly. That is the trap. And acting like nothing matters is the way out. Open Book Part 2: What acting like nothing matters actually means. Let me be precise here. Because this idea is easy to misunderstand. Acting like nothing matters does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean destroying your ambition. It does not mean treating people carelessly or floating through life in a fog of detachment. What it means is something far more specific. And far more powerful. It means releasing your attachment to outcomes you cannot control. It means decoupling your identity from external results. It means doing the work, loving the people, pursuing the goals, without making your inner peace conditional on how any of it turns out. Let me give you an example. 2 people walk into the same job interview. Person A has attached their entire sense of worth to getting this job. Every second of the interview, a voice in their head is monitoring the interviewer's expressions, calculating the odds, catastrophizing possible failure. They are tense. They are performing. They are so desperate to get it right that they can barely be present. Person B walks in and thinks, I'm going to show up fully. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be myself. And whatever happens, happens. Person B is not indifferent. Person B cares. But Person B has released their grip on the outcome. Who do you think performs better in that interview? Almost always, it is the person who has made peace with the possibility of failure. Because freedom from attachment creates a kind of fearless presence that desperation can never produce. This is what the ancient Stoics called amor fati, love of fate. what the Buddhists called non-attachment, what the Taoists called wu-wei, effortless action. Every major wisdom tradition in human history has arrived at the same conclusion from different directions. The person who needs nothing is free to have everything. The person who is okay with losing is the hardest to defeat. The person who is okay with being disliked is the most magnetic. The person who is okay with failing is the most likely to eventually succeed. Because they are not wasting their energy on fear. They are not shrinking themselves to avoid judgment. They are not holding back waiting for permission. They act. Fully. Freely. Without the paralyzing weight of needing it to go a certain way. That is what acting like nothing matters actually means. Not apathy. Liberation. Open Book Part 3. The 7 things you need to stop taking so seriously. Now let's get specific. Because the philosophy is important. But what changes your life is the application. So I'm going to walk through the 7 areas where most people are overinvested, where the weight they're carrying is disproportionate to the actual stakes, and I'm going to show you what happens when you loosen your grip. 1. Other people's opinions. This is the big one. The one that underlies almost every other form of unnecessary suffering. You spend an enormous amount of mental and emotional energy managing what other people think of you. Editing yourself before you speak. Replaying conversations afterward to check for mistakes. Adjusting your behavior based on what you imagine others will approve of. And here is the devastating truth about all of that effort. You cannot control what other people think. Not really. Not ever. You can perform a version of yourself perfectly calibrated for approval, and some people still won't like you. You can shrink yourself completely, and some people will still find fault. The opinions of other people are a moving target that you will exhaust yourself chasing and never fully reach. So what happens when you stop chasing it? When you genuinely, deeply decide that you cannot control their perception and you're no longer going to try, something remarkable happens. You become yourself. Fully. Without apology. And paradoxically, the version of you that stops performing for approval is far more magnetic than the curated version ever was. Because authenticity is rare. And people are drawn to it like light in the dark. 2. Being right. How much energy do you spend needing to be right? In arguments with people you love. In internal debates with yourself. In the desperate need to have your perspective validated and the other person's perspective defeated. The need to be right is one of the most exhausting and relationship-destroying forces in human life. And it almost never produces what it promises. Even when you win the argument, even when the other person concedes, do you actually feel better? Or does the victory feel hollow while the relationship feels slightly more damaged? What if you let go of the need to be right? Not to be a pushover. Not to abandon your values. But to genuinely release the ego investment in winning every intellectual and emotional battle. What if the goal shifted from being right to understanding clearly? That shift alone will transform your relationships, your inner life, and your ability to actually learn, because the person who needs to be right cannot afford to be wrong, and the person who cannot afford to be wrong will never grow. 3. Your reputation. Your reputation is a story other people are telling about you. You did not write it. You cannot fully edit it. You cannot control it. Yes, your actions influence it. Yes, how you treat people matters. But at the end of the day, your reputation exists in other people's minds, and those minds will do with it what they will. The people who are most obsessed with their reputation are often the most paralyzed. Because protecting a reputation becomes a full-time job that prevents you from taking any risk, trying anything new, or being honest about who you actually are. The people who act like their reputation doesn't matter, who just focus on doing the work, treating people with integrity, and being genuine, tend to build the most powerful reputations of all. Because reputation built on performance collapses under pressure. Reputation built on character compounds over time. Stop managing your reputation. Start building your character. The reputation will follow. 4. Your past. This one runs deep. The past is over. It does not exist anywhere in the physical universe except in the neural pathways of human memory. And yet most people are living as though it is happening right now. Carrying shame about things they did years ago. Identifying with failures that happened in a completely different chapter of their life. Letting a painful story about where they came from determine where they are allowed to go. Acting like the past doesn't matter is not the same as pretending it didn't happen. You don't deny the wound. You don't minimize the experience. But you stop letting a chapter that ended write the rest of the book. The you that made that mistake, that you is gone. They were doing the best they could with what they had and who they were at that time. You are not that person anymore. You have never stopped changing. Give yourself permission to be someone who no longer belongs to their worst moment. 5. Being understood. You will spend a significant portion of your life trying to be understood, and feeling wounded when you're not. You'll try to explain yourself to people who have already decided who you are. You'll try to justify your choices to people who aren't capable of hearing you. You'll try to make your pain legible to people who aren't willing to sit with it. And it will exhaust you. Here is what the most psychologically free people in the world seem to know. You do not need to be understood to be whole. Your worth is not contingent on someone else's comprehension of you. Your path does not require validation from people who can't see it. You can be deeply, beautifully misunderstood, and still be exactly right about who you are and where you're going. Let people misunderstand you. Be at peace with it. Keep moving. 6. How far along you are. The comparison trap is one of the most vicious forms of self-inflicted suffering in modern life. You look at what someone else has built by your age and feel behind. You look at where you thought you'd be by now and feel like a failure. You measure your chapter 3 against someone else's, chapter 20, and wonder what's wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. You are exactly where you are. And the timeline you're measuring yourself against is completely, entirely made up. There is no schedule. There is no correct pace. There is no moment at which it becomes too late. The people who do extraordinary things are rarely the people who did them on time. They're the people who refused to stop after the world told them they were behind. Release the timeline. Release the comparison. The only relevant question is, am I moving? Am I growing? Am I becoming? If yes, you're right on time. 7. The outcome. This is the final one. And it may be the deepest. What would you do, really do, fully do, without holding back, if you were completely at peace with the outcome being whatever it turns out to be? What would you create if you weren't paralyzed by whether it would succeed? What would you say if you weren't terrified of how it would land? What would you try if you weren't crushed by the idea of failing? The attachment to outcome is the single greatest killer of human potential. Not lack of talent. Not lack of opportunity. Not bad luck. Attachment to outcome. Because when the outcome has to go a certain way for you to be okay, you will play it safe. You will hold back. You will wait for certainty that never comes. But the person who acts regardless, who does the work because the work is worth doing, who loves because love is worth giving, who creates because creation is worth experiencing, that person is unstoppable. Not because they never fail, but because failure doesn't stop them. Open Book Part 4, The Paradox of Not Caring. I want to spend some time here on what I consider the most beautiful paradox embedded in this entire philosophy. When you act like nothing matters, when you truly release your desperate grip on outcomes, opinions, approval, and results, you don't become less invested in life. You become more present to it. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most alive, most real, most fully yourself. Were they the moments when you were performing? When you were anxious about how you were coming across? When you were carefully managing the impression you were making? Or were they the moments when you forgot to care? When you were so deep in a conversation that you stopped monitoring it? When you were so absorbed in creating something that you stopped wondering if it was good enough? When you were laughing so hard that you forgot to be self-conscious? When you were so present with someone you loved that the rest of the world disappeared? Those moments, those fully alive moments, are available to you all the time. But only when you stop gripping. The tighter you hold on to needing things to go a certain way, the less you actually experience what's happening. This is the paradox. Caring too much about life actually prevents you from living it. The person who acts like nothing matters is not checked out. They are completely, radically present, because they're not spending half their mental bandwidth managing how the present moment is being perceived. They are just here. Fully. Without the filter of constant self-monitoring. And in that state, in that fearless, unguarded, fully present state, the most remarkable things become possible. Creativity flows. Relationships deepen. Work becomes meaningful. Risk becomes exciting rather than terrifying. Failure becomes information rather than identity. This is not a philosophy of indifference. This is a philosophy of radical freedom. Open Book Part 5: How to Actually Practice This. Philosophy without practice is just poetry. So let's talk about how you actually begin living this way. The daily detachment practice. Every morning, before you begin your day, ask yourself one question. What am I gripping right now that I need to release? Maybe it's the outcome of a conversation you're about to have. Maybe it's what a certain person thinks of you. Maybe it's a result you've been desperately chasing. Maybe it's a version of yourself you feel like you should be by now. Name it. And then, consciously, deliberately, loosen your grip on it. Not to stop caring, but to stop needing. This practice, done consistently, will rewire the way you move through your day. You will notice the moments when you're gripping. And you will have a choice. The phrase that changes everything. When you feel the anxiety of needing an outcome, repeat this to yourself. Whatever happens, I will be okay. Simple. Almost childishly simple. But neurologically powerful. Because the anxiety underneath most of your overinvestment is a fear that the wrong outcome will break you. That you won't survive the rejection, the failure, the judgment. When you remind your nervous system that you will survive, that you have survived before, and you will survive again, the grip begins to loosen. You don't need the outcome. You want it. And wanting without needing is what freedom feels like. The observer experiment. Once a day, pick one situation where you would normally feel reactive, where you would normally feel the pull of needing to control, to perform, to get it right. And instead of reacting, observe. Watch yourself in the situation as though you are a curious, compassionate witness. Not judging. Not catastrophizing. Just watching. Notice how you feel. Notice what the fear underneath the feeling is. Notice what you're actually afraid of losing. This small act of observation creates distance between the stimulus and the response. And in that distance lives your freedom. The weekly failure practice. Once a week, deliberately do something you're afraid of doing badly. Talk to a stranger. Try a skill you have no talent for. Share something you created before you feel ready. Say the true thing you've been holding back. Not to force success, but to practice the experience of imperfection and surviving it. Because every time you do the thing you're afraid of and the world doesn't end, every time you are imperfect and still standing, your nervous system learns something it cannot learn any other way. I am okay regardless of the outcome. That learning compounds. Over weeks and months, you become someone who is genuinely difficult to destabilize. Someone who moves through the world with a lightness and a confidence that has nothing to do with arrogance, and everything to do with freedom. Clapperboard. Here is what I want to leave you with. You only get one life. One. And the question at the center of that life is not, did I get it right? The question is, did I actually live it? Did you show up fully, or did you spend most of it managing how it looked? Did you love people openly, or did you hold back to protect yourself from losing them? Did you try the thing, or did you wait until you were sure it would work? Acting like nothing matters is not giving up on life. It is the deepest, most radical act of engagement with it. It is saying, I am here. I am fully here. And I am not going to waste a single moment of this trying to control how it's perceived. That is available to you right now. Not after you've healed everything. Not after you've figured it all out. Not after things calm down. Right now. Today. In the very next conversation you have and the very next choice you make. And if this video gave you something, if something in here landed, if something shifted even slightly, then I want you to do one thing. Subscribe to this channel. Because this is what we do here. Every week, we go into the deep end of the conversations most people are afraid to have. About identity, about freedom, about the kind of life that is actually worth living. If that's the conversation you want to keep having, this is your place. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs it. And I'll see you in the next one. Go be free.